Did you know a new Hellboy movie came out today? Probably not, so let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Let me know, did you know that a new Hellboy movie came out today? And if you've seen it, what did you think about it? Give me that point of reference. Are you a Hellboy fan? Have you read the comics? Have you just watched the previous films? All of that fun stuff. As for me, I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a Hellboy fan. I enjoy the Guillermo del Toro films that he put out now 20 years ago. And so I can have fun in this world, but it's not something I'm specifically a fan of. And I've never read any of the comics, so I can't speak anything about comic accuracy or anything like that. I'm just watching this as someone that likes movies. With that said, let's get started with the review. And I went into this film with very limited expectations, where it's a film that has a much lower budget than the previous three Hellboy films. It was distributed by Ketchup Entertainment.
Are you kidding me?
If you've never heard of Ketchup Entertainment, that means me and you are in the same boat, because I've never heard of Ketchup Entertainment, and I talk about movies for a living. In fact, this is a film that did not have a United States release date announced until just a week or two ago. We knew that the movie was out there was a trailer, but they didn't have a release date for it. And then when you have previously put out 3 different theatrical Hellboy movies, and you put out a new one that releases straight to digital video, that's not a great sign. But some things that kind of did balance that out a little bit is that the movie's screenplay was written by the original creator of Hellboy. Now, creating a comic book character is not the same skill set as writing a movie. There's unique things that make each medium work. And so sometimes someone that's great at writing novels or comic books isn't very good at writing screenplays and understanding what that format works. But when you have the original creator working on the script, you can expect it's probably going to capture the essence, at least, of the characters and the world a little bit better. And having watched the movie this morning, it was significantly better than it could have been, but that also doesn't mean that it's particularly good either. And I think at the core of my feelings on this movie is that it felt like episode 7 of season 1 of a Hellboy TV show, where the story just kind of drops us right into the middle of an adventure that Hellboy is on, and then he kind of gets shot off into these woods, trying to get into a church and some coal mines, tracking a witch, a spider, all of this different stuff. And you just kind of get wrapped up right in the middle of this adventure. But the scope and the size of the story feels very episodic. The world that it creates is very small, where if you watch in particular the Del Toro films, even the one from, what was that, 2019, even that one, it feels like this big populated world that has all these creatures everywhere. And the nature of this movie, almost certainly because they had a very limited budget, you're walking around in the woods to a house, a cabin in the woods, an old church in the woods, that despite the movie being set in the 1950s, it could be set at any point in time, because it just doesn't really matter, because it's just so remote of a location with such a small population that the world building feels very small. It assumes that you have knowledge of Hellboy to flesh everything out. It doesn't feel the need to really do a lot to establish who Hellboy is or anything like that. We're just in the middle of an adventure that feels episodic, and it feels small scale, and the budget feels limited. Thus, it feels like an episode of a TV show. That doesn't make it bad, but it doesn't feel particularly big and cinematic, which I imagine is why they didn't even try to do a theatrical release of the film, because it probably plays better on a TV than it does on a big screen, where you compare it to other movies you've seen on a big screen. Other thing to kind of talk about here is that it is very much a horror version of the character. from the pacing, where it's very slow and I'm messing up my words. Very slow-paced film that's deliberate in its pacing. Even the way people talk kind of has these pauses between their words and their sentences. Kind of has that cadence to it. The atmosphere is very much horror, and in particular the score, it kind of has that sort of like looming notes in the background with plucked notes and things like that. It's that sort of movie that kind of fills out the film that you're watching. And that gives it a unique vibe that it is a comic book movie that is overtly a horror film. But I do think it because you're watching a guy that it kicks off with an action set piece. There is an action set piece every 15 or 20 or so minutes. If you feel that slow pace more so than in a traditional horror film. And even in some of the action set pieces where the editing starts moving quicker and the camera's moving around, things are being tossed, bullets are being fired, and it's still kind of doing this atmospheric kind of music where even when the movie picks up, it still can feel a little bit slow. And I think that pacing, that type of score, makes it feel like it's dragging more than it probably actually is. And it doesn't feel like it has as much life as it should, where just the use of music, the pace at which people speak, brings a liveliness to a story that this movie's just kind of lacking, which is particularly interesting because the director of this movie is the director of Crank, which is like Grand Theft Auto on cocaine, speed, and Red Bull. I mean, it's ADHD, hyperactive in every sense of the imagination. And then this Hellboy movie is deliberately the opposite of that, where it's slow. It takes its time to breathe, and it's about building tension and scares, and it's creepy, and there's monsters and things like that. So if you like Hellboy and you want a horror Hellboy movie, that's what this is. This will deliver that experience for you. If you're looking for a fast-paced action movie, that's not what this is. You also have to go into it knowing it had a very limited budget. So the opening scene as a CGI spider, it does not look great. There's some other shots that do not look great in it. But other times, like, it worked well enough. There's, like, in particular, if you like practical effects, there's a number of just practical things in here and old school stuff of, like, bodies filling up and, like, you know, rubber suit, but it's that creepy sort of thing that looks interesting if you like practical and you like to move away from CGI. And so, like a movie that, once again, if it was an episode of the TV show Hellboy that doesn't exist, then you'd be like, oh, it's a solid episode of Hellboy, the TV show. But when it's a movie, you compare it to other movies. And in particular, when there's 3 other Hellboy movies, and 2 of them are by Guillermo del Toro, it doesn't compare favorably to these big, more expensive films from a better director. If it was in a different format, it would be easier to kind of swallow and receive. So, as for the lead actor, I think he does a fine job, and there's nothing that particularly stood out as great, nothing particularly bad. It's kind of all the performers. Everybody does a good enough job without doing anything that embarrasses themselves and not doing anything that makes them pop or stand out all that well. If you like Hellboy and you just want a little bit of time in that world, it's fine. You don't need to do what I did and buy it for $20 on a digital store. You can wait until it ends up on a streaming service. That's my recommendation. If you like Hellboy, wait to stream it. No reason to pay the outrageous cost that they're charging to purchase the movie right now on digital. Let me know what you thought down below in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much.